We're good to go. I'm on today with Dr. Patrick Slattery. He has a radio program on. Go ahead and plug your program real quick, Dr. Slattery.
Okay, my program is National Bugle Radio on the Republic Broadcasting Network. And while we're live streaming now on Patrick's channel, I'm recording a show for future use on my channel, either for tomorrow, Friday, or for next Tuesday. This is it is the evening of March 21st on Thursday evening. And so I have that show on RBN. You can go to republicbroadcasting.org if you want to catch it live, or you can go to the Patrick Slattery YouTube channel. I also am Don Black's sidekick on Stormfront Radio, and because of Don Black's move and some other issues, I've actually been filling in for him for the past few weeks as the main host. So those are my gigs. I also help out with Dr. David Duke's show. But go to the Patrick Slattery YouTube channel or go to nationalbugle.com and you'll find all the content that I make.
Well, I'm glad to have you on, Dr. Slattery. And so we've got some people just now tuning in, and I'll read off some questions we have from the chat later. But we just started recording your program earlier, and we talked about Jewish roles in revolutionary movements and traditionally how they have set up the pre-revolutionary environment and destabilized the state and the elite, and then delivered the knockout blows. And I was hoping maybe we could talk about how they've set this up here in this country.
We sure can. And the thing is, when you're talking about this country, you run into the question of really where do you start? And there were certainly Sephardic Jews who were here very early on and involved in the slave trade. And if you look into the middle of the 1800s, you'll see, I think he was Ashkenazi, not Sephardic, but the Secretary of Treasury of the Confederate States of America, what was his name, Benjamin something, or something Benjamin.
The last name was Benjamin. Yeah.
Yeah, his last name was Benjamin. But really, it starts to accelerate with the large Jewish immigration into the United States in the late 1800s, and you're talking about mostly poor Jews, but you also had some rich bankers. You had some rich people who were able to finance the community, and of course you had the community, the ethnocentrism, which was part and parcel of Jewish culture going back so long. And so where do you start? You get World War, the Federal Reserve and the World War I, and there's already a lot of power there, getting us into World War II and a lot of things that were getting set up then. 1965 Immigration Act, and it's just accelerating, and now you've got what I would consider the Jew d'etat, the Jewish coup d'etat against Donald Trump, and the power is increasing. It's hard to just go back and say, where do you start? Where do you go back and say, where do you start?
Well, it goes back far, and I'd say the revolutionary Jews came over much later than the Jews that laid the foundation. The foundation, of course, was financial, and I'm paraphrasing Archibald Ramsey, who wrote The Nameless War, when he said essentially that first Jews buy their way into the elite, or they entrap members of the elite. Then they use that to establish revolutionary beachheads. So, of course, the Jews were in charge of the slave trade for the most part in this country, and they made a lot of money off from the slave trade. And later, the real danger came, of course, in the form of the private central banks. There were 3 different incarnations of which we're living under one of them right now, which presidents like Andrew Jackson fought against and successfully destroyed. These were beachheads financially in the country. And really, the real danger to this country came when the Russian Jews started coming in the 1880s and 1890s. Do you know what triggered all of the Russian Jews to come into America?
Well, there's politics in Russia, and you had, among the Czars, you had more philo-Semitic Jews and more, harsher Jews. And I guess there was some laws that were passed by the father of Tsar Nicholas, right? Wasn't it the father And didn't he get assassinated?
Yeah,
Refresh me.
Tsar Nicholas I tried to subsidize Jewish integration into the agricultural life of Russia, which failed. Tsar Nicholas II then, starting in the 1850s, opened up the gates wide, acting on Enlightenment philosophy, letting the Jews flood into the cultural institutions and pretty much take over a lot of the press and a lot of sin industries throughout Russia. And it was under Tsar Nicholas III, after the Jews executed his father, the Jews assassinated on the night before the Purim starts. So you know how we invaded Iraq the first time on Purim, the first day? Well, on the eve of Purim, in the late 19th century, the Jews killed Tsar Nicholas II, and he was the one who liberated the Jews. He was like the Napoleon of Russia that emancipated the Jews.
Wish you a happy Purim. Purim is just ending now as we're recording. I guess it's sunset where you are.
Well, what I'm saying is that they killed Tsar Nicholas II, a Jewish assassin, on the eve of Purim in Russia in the 19th century, and then Tsar Nicholas III came in, and there were a bunch of pogroms against the Jews in response to the Jewish assassination of the king, the Tsar. And Tsar Nicholas III actually stopped them, and all evidence points out, and this is from Solzhenitsyn's 200 Years Together, Tsar Nicholas III stopped the pogroms, and the common people from the bottom up were trying to remove the Jews from power, but Tsar Nicholas III stopped them. But in order, a concession that Tsar Nicholas III, and this is the reason all the Jews started leaving Russia en masse to the United States, was because Tsar Nicholas III said, okay, well, the commoners are really mad because of the usury and stuff they do. Basically, the peasants run up a huge tab to the Jewish taverns after the harvest, and then the Jews own the whole next crop because they get the goyim drunk and then get them to sign contracts promising away all of their next harvest while they're drunk to keep on getting more drinks. And so Tsar Nicholas III, just like in the state of New Hampshire, said that all liquor must then be sold through the state. So instead of Jews owning all the taverns, and Jews largely made their living off from the sin industry of liquor sales and tavern ownership, once it became that Jews could no longer vertically own the whole process of liquor manufacture and sale, at that point the state came in, and at this point, once the state of Russia was in charge of the sale of liquor as opposed to private Jews, a bunch of them lost their living and they just came over here. And at that point, these revolutionary Jews, combined with the German Jew bankers that were here, started up the huge program against Russia for having had the sin of removing Jews from sin industries under Tsar Nicholas III, despite him having saved them from pogroms.
I just want to clarify something. So we had Tsar Nicholas I, who was reigning, his reign is from 1825, I believe, to 1855. Mm-hmm. Alexander II for 1855.
Tsar Nicholas II.
And then Alexander III from 1881 to 1894, and Nicholas II, who was the last Tsar.
The third. The third was the last Tsar.
Okay, I've got a list in front of me. I just want to make sure we're getting everything right.
Anyhow, so the point I'm making here is that limitations were placed, just as in 1930s Germany, on Jews' ability to participate in sin industries because they were using it to destroy the common people. And it was after the Russian state intervened in the Jewish control of the liquor business and stopped the peasants from essentially getting fleeced when they were drunk by Jews getting them to sign away their next harvest, that they poured into the United States. And at that point, the Jews began laying the revolutionary groundwork. Now, this is when the revolutionary Jews came in. So, as Ramsey talks about in his book, the first thing Jews do to a government they wish to replace is they get it heavily indebted, and they destabilize the social foundations, and the Jews take control of the means of propaganda, which was presses at the time in revolutionary France, or 1640s Britain, or 1917 Russia. And then they deliver the revolts that bring the state to its knees when it's already wobbling and about to collapse from the debt and the financial hardship and the embargoes. At that point, the Jews bring the civil unrest, and that comes in the form of the Levelers' Revolution of the 1640s under Cromwell. It comes in the form of the Reign of Terror as led by Jews during 1790s France. And then it came again in 1905, which failed, and then successfully in 1917 as the Bolshevik uprising of the proletariat, which was all led by Jews. And the segue, this whole conversation is coming into saying that the Jews have laid the revolutionary groundwork here in this country, and they couldn't do a workers' uprising here like they could otherwise, so they had to bring in replacement populations. The proletariat equivalent of for here under the new Jewish elite here, the equivalent of the proletariat is then the non-white population that the Jews are using their propaganda to incite against us. So here, the former serfs and the people, the commoners, that became the proletariat are analogous in Russia to today all of the non-whites that are being told that, white supremacism this, white supremacism that, the whites are responsible for all your woes, Harvard is all whites, we're hiding all of the Jewish crimes and overrepresentation behind the blanket term white, and we're going to be left holding the bag, and we're going to be blamed for everything the Jews have done. And there's been generations of anti-white propaganda, and as the percentage of the population that is non-white rises, so is also rising the level of propaganda against white people, where even just a white kid confidently smiling back at someone who is hurling all sorts of racial insults at him becomes the justification for calls to genocide by Jew propagandists on Twitter and stuff. And so I'd say the Jews right now are preparing to deliver the knockout blows in terms of social unrest, the way they delivered them during all of the other times where they laid the revolutionary framework. So they laid the revolutionary framework under Charles I's England with Cromwell. They laid it in the lead up to the Reign of Terror in France. They laid it again in 1917 in Russia, and they tried to also do this in Germany. They tried to create a revolt in 1918 and 1919 in Germany, and the Jews actually seized powers. They succeeded through the destabilization of the German state and then the propagandized uprising. They were able to seize power in Bavaria. And so I'd say that's about where we're...
And Hungary at the same time.
And Hungary as well, and they also, to some extent, had success in other countries. The Ukraine, they attempted to do this. The reason for the Holodomor, the genocide of the Ukrainians, is because their national spirit was so strong. And that's also why they said Germany must perish, is because the veterans there successfully suppressed the bottom-up revolution that came after the country was toppled from the top down. So essentially, Archibald Ramsey talks about in The Nameless War, which I've been narrating on this channel. I've got two very good edited chapters up. There are more to come, where they destabilize the state from the top down. They destroy the foundation of the state economically. They destroy the indigenous elites' control of the mechanisms of propaganda, and the Jews seize it under frontmen. Name-changing Jews often in America here, but often in the past they actually hired useful idiots to be the fronts, like the Duc d'Orléans in France, or Cromwell in revolutionary 1640s Britain. And at this point, they're actually, just like that, do you know another term for the Reign of Terror in 1790s France?
What's the other term?
The Massacre of the Blondes.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So
So I want to insert something here.
Yeah.
Because, it's very interesting what you're talking about, and you certainly have all of these, historical trends. I'd look at things a little bit, when you talk about, it sounds like talking about a plan. They're planning to do this or they're planning to do that, and I don't think there is a plan. I think there are plans, and I think there are non-plans. So what I mean is that I don't think there is a script, a plan that is being carried out in a step-by-step manner. I think if you're talking about back in the old days, or if you're talking about now, there are certain organizations and groups that meet, and they might say, this is our agenda, this is what we would like. I don't think there's a single one, and I think what's going on now, I don't think it's any more planned than the way wolves chase an elk. The wolves don't have to plan it. They all kind of know their role. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think Dr. Duke made a good point of this. I believe on today's show, he mentioned that there doesn't need to be formal coordination. This is something they do instinctively. They're raised to hate the goy, and they're instinctually they have that very high in-group preference. Arguably, it's genetic, and this is what they do. This is the externality of the way they're socialized and their biological predispositions.
I mean, we all have group preferences, but it's not necessarily is not every person and not every group has the same level of group preference. We don't all have the same level of ethnocentrism, just like we don't all have the same level of innate math skill, for instance. It can vary. And the point I was trying to make on Dr. Duke's show earlier today was that it's not that Jews are uniquely ethnocentric, but they have a high level of ethnocentricity, and maybe a very high level. Maybe it's almost record levels. Who knows? Maybe Andaman Islanders are higher, but what difference would that make? But also, they have through their power and through their power in society over the past many decades, have also been able to repress any ethnocentrism or any acting on ethnocentrism among their main rival, which is the white European populations.
I agree 100%. They see solidarity as their strength, and as you can see through the Birthright Israel program, through their almost unanimous support for the State of Israel, granted they'll have debates about how to best secure Israel, but overall Jews support Israel almost to a T, or almost to the last one of them. And the point that I'm making here is that I was showing what Sir Archibald Ramsay referred to as a cookie cutter conceptually, the way they do it. And this cookie cutter formula has been employed. There's been massive propaganda against the original elite here, which I guess would be white Anglo-Saxons or whatever. At the same time, the other preconditions are also met. So a revolutionary, so England, they experienced financial troubles to help facilitate the agitation of the commoners against the aristocrats and the king, and the aristocrats that were loyal to him. In France, King Louis was entrapped into one form of debt after another. He had a Jew economic advisor that just continuously got the kingdom more and more and more in debt, to the point where they lost their ability to refinance their national debt in France. And at this point is when the death blow came to the existing elite. The same thing happened to Russia. They strangled Russia with embargoes. They strangled Russia by cutting off her trade, by not letting Russia raise money on the bond markets in Frankfurt or New York or in London. And this is also what they did to Germany when they failed to deliver the knockout blow. They destroyed the economy, triggered hyperinflation, had people starving, had massive disease, and they tried to use that then as the collapsed economic status of the state as a way to facilitate the revolution. And what I'm saying, the commonality here, the most obvious one is, which one of those prerequisites do you think is the most obvious one in the United States? Out of the overburdening indebtedness, the destruction of the morals, I'd say what sticks out the most is the level of indebtedness of this country. There's no way this country will ever be able to repay its debts, the same way that King Louis no longer had any hope of repaying his national debt. The same way that Tsar Nicolas III could not even raise monies abroad, didn't even have the money to import stuff into Russia when he was being hamstrung economically. And I would say the stage is set for the economic collapse of this country. And I think they're going to do it, because right now we're being propped up by being able to export our debt. And I think they're going to pull the rug out from under us, because too many Goyim are waking up. And I think they want us, they want the next stage brought on, which in every case, the Levelers' Revolution of the 1640s, the reign of terror in France in the 1790s, and also 1917 Russia and all these other Jewish revolutions, as they wound up lining up and killing anyone that pointed out the fact that it was Jews. Now, there was one man, and this is in chapter 2 of Archibald Ramsay's book, that was one of the useful idiots. I believe it was Robespierre or Duc d'Orléans. And in the Revolutionary Council, he stood up and said, there is a hostile foreign element here that is controlling this revolution. This revolution comes from without. I've been one of their idiots. And that night he was poisoned. because he was starting to drop the red pills to the people in Paris to let them know this isn't my revolution. I'm trying to save the king's life here. I wanted this to be a constitutional monarchy. I wanted us to have a Magna Carta. I didn't want everyone that was in power to be killed. And once he saw the writing on the wall, even his own head rolled. He was poisoned that night. And I think this could be analogous to Trump. If Trump really had good intentions, but thought he could cooperate with the Israelis or with these Jewish power brokers, the campaign finance bundlers, these mega donors that pump the black money in that can now be pumped in since Citizens United, etc., etc. I think Trump could be analogous to the Duc d'Orleans, where he's now, he had second thoughts about having cooperated with them, kind of took steps towards naming them, hinted at it, and this is the same thing that happened to either it was the Duc d'Orleans or Robespierre in France, where he tried to warn the public that he had cooperated with these people, but he regretted it. And this is analogous because Trump is screwed unless he names a Jew, I think. I don't see any situation where Trump loses the election and he gets to stay out of prison or the Jews don't have him executed. I think they are...
I don't know. If he names a Jew, I think I can envision scenarios where he actually does get out of office, but he is, the thing is right now he's so defeated, and if he's defeated now, and if he remains ineffectual for the next 18 months and loses the election, they might let him get away because he's no longer a threat, right? He would be completely impotent, so they might not put him in jail. It's hard to say. I'm not the best prognosticator, but who knows? I mean, if he, I would certainly like him or somebody, and for him at this point, what does he have to lose? Because he's not going to go down the way things are going now. The way he'll go down in history is somebody who maybe shook things up a little bit, but was extremely ineffectual. He's going to go down as an Andrew Johnson type of president. One thing I want to say. I don't know what Archibald Ramsey thinks. I think he's come across a formula, and I think that formula is valid. But I don't know if any Jew is consciously aware of this formula.
Well, ultimately, if this is what they do unconsciously, doesn't that make it even worse than if this was a conscious planned hierarchy that could be interrupted?
Yeah. It makes it different, and maybe it does make it worse.
It makes it worse in terms of being able to redeem themselves.
I think this is the result of their group behavior that doesn't require a plan.
Well, there is at the same time a massive level of coordination. You can go back to the Prince of the Jews proclamations that he sent out via courier to the Jews of Iberia, or the Jews of France, or the Jews of England, where he instructed them to infiltrate the culture and destroy it from within.
There's a certain amount of planning, there's a certain amount of coordination, but there's also an awful lot of just impromptu, natural cooperation.
But also the instinct to subvert is strong, because if this is not planned, given that they've done this over and over and over again, I would say the revolutionary spirit is the thing that is not planned. But I think the destruction of the country financially, the enslavement of the country, the disruption of its trade if it's not cooperating with Jewish power structures, I think that is quite well planned.
Well, the reason I emphasize this is because, well, partly because I mean that's what I actually think. I do think that. I think that there's a certain amount that's planned, but an awful lot that's not. And I say it because I think if people go and look for the plan and can't find it, it doesn't mean that this type of thing isn't going to happen. You know what I mean?
Well,
I think
the
predictions that are made based on this formula are probably pretty valid, even if there's no formula written down. Just as the predictions made by the protocols of the learned elders of Zion have been played out, even if that book was not written by a scribe at such a meeting. See what I'm getting at?
Yes,
just because the learned elders of Zion might not have been written by Jews. It might have been written by Czars of the Agent. Doesn't mean that the predictions made by it aren't valid predictions.
Well, as I've heard Dr. Duke say in the past, it was most likely written by Russian aristocrats that understood the revolutionary spirit of the Jews after their emancipation, when they were seizing control of the educational institutions in Russia. Starting in the 1870s, Russians said this emancipation thing was a bad idea because the Jews are becoming way overrepresented in the schools because they're trying to avoid military service. The law of 1874 exempted people pursuing higher education from certain types of military service. And what they did was they then went into academia, and they used academia as places from which to coordinate subversion, where they propagandized people against the existing hierarchy, and where they started this ultra-egalitarian, anti-moralist, anti-Christian, anti-traditional revolutionary spirit. And it's laid out very well in Solzhenitsyn's 200 Years Together. I believe chapter 5 and 6 go into this quite well.
Okay. Well, my recording is, my program's filled up. I don't know how much longer you want to live stream, or if you want to take questions from people.
Yeah, let's. So I will be taking questions here. I'll read them aloud. So, audience, if you have questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. So we're waiting for those. So,
I heard you have a cat.
Yeah, I do have a cat, and
good thing my dog wasn't in the room, because we would have gotten into an awful lot of sound, a lot of extraneous sound there.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, the cat likes to complain. So Zuhar X6 asked me, do I hate Muslims? And the answer is no, I do not. I actually strongly empathize with the Palestinians, and whether the Arabs that are being displaced and genocided by the Jewish elites and their proxy forces in the Middle East are Christian or Muslim, I have tremendous sympathy for the Arabs that are being ethnically cleansed from their homeland in a very similar yet more direct fashion that is being done to white people in our countries.
Yeah, and I'm looking at my globe, and if you look at the globe, even better than looking at a map of the world, because the Muslim populations do tend to be in the lower latitudes. You've got this massive expanse from Morocco on the Atlantic all the way across northern Africa, all the way across southern Asia, with a few exceptions, over to Mindanao on the Pacific. You've got this massive swath, and a lot of Africa, massive swath of Muslim area. They've got huge places where they can live, and of course the areas closest to Israel have been, which is just a small part of the Muslim world.
They've been destabilized heavily, yielding two bird. One, and that one stone is then being used to take out two birds. Of course, number one, generate replacement populations to go in and destabilize white countries with, that can be then propagandized against the indigenous whites. And number two, it destabilizes the countries that could offer resistance to the expansion of Israel's borders.
Absolutely. And so I have no antipathy. I have no hostility towards Muslims, and I have sympathy in particular with the Palestinians.
There were other groups too. There were the Assyrians and the Armenians, and they aren't all Arabs, and they aren't all Muslims, but
they're not all Arabs, and they're not all Muslims. A lot of people who are being adversely impacted in Iraq and Syria and other places. But the massive Muslim immigration into Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and the United States, which it's not that far along in the United States, but there's plenty of potential for it. This is very destabilizing, and it's got to stop. And that doesn't mean it's hatred towards Muslims, but it's no good. And what I say sometimes, it's like our Jewish overlords are putting Christians and Muslims into a jar and shaking it up.
Yep. And are you familiar? Are you familiar with what the Israelis did to the Lebanese Christians and Muslims in the 1970s and 80s?
Oh yeah, and you had very much a lot of divide and conquer, and you have
They
the
would
massacres.
they would have IDF soldiers pretending to be Christian militia go and massacre a bunch of Muslims, and then they'd have IDF soldiers pretending to be Christian militia, the other end, and massacre the other side until they were fighting each other in a full-blown civil war, at which point Israel invaded and occupied a bunch of land.
Ehud Barak, who was the prime minister of Israel for a little bit in the late 1990s and around 2000, and then for a while was Bibi's defense minister. He's Israel's most decorated soldier ever, right? Ehud Barak. And one of the things he's most celebrated for, was dressing up in drag and going with other IDF soldier or Mossad, IDF soldiers, and he was pretending to be the girlfriend, and the other soldiers are pretending to be the boyfriend, and then going into a apartment building where you had some Hezbollah leaders living, and shooting up everybody in the apartment building, including like an old Italian lady.
Yep.
And he's the most decorated soldier ever. The cross-dressing Ehud Barak.
They also have a monument to a mosque shooter in Jerusalem, I believe. The guy in the 1980s that went in and just started mowing down people in mosques.
At the temple of what was it? The temple of the caves, or the cave of the patriarchs. Yeah, Goldstein.
Yeah, Goldstein.
Yeah, Baruch Goldstein. And here's some fun trivia. Who was his classmate when he went to medical school at Yeshiva University in New York?
I'm guessing, Benjamin No, hold on. Yeshiva in New York, Kushner's father?
He ran for president.
Bernie Sanders?
No, Bernie Sanders is too old. Howard Dean.
Howard Dean.
Howard Dean was his classmate in medical school at Yeshiva University in New York, at the Albert Einstein Medical School.
Oh. Well, Dr. Slattery, we're going to do the next question here. That's a nice factoid, though. I like that. That's good trivia. So, Tang40Z asked, do you have ideas for non-violent stunts we can use to disrupt the media elites? And this is something that I've said before, and I'll say it again. If you see a news crew, and I've done this before, and it works. I shut down a news crew outside of AIPAC for like 6 hours. Whenever they tried to set up their cameras and start singing the praises of Israel and the Shabbos Goyim that serve Israel and our government, I was walking behind the news crew, behind the journalists, holding up a sign where I knew the camera couldn't avoid it, that said, the Goyim know, #USS Liberty. And they kept on stopping, and then setting up again, pointing the camera another way, pretending that I wasn't an influence. And the moment they were about to start recording again, I'd run behind them with the sign again. And, you can shut down a news crew. It's not illegal to stand behind people with a sign, and unless they want to bring a backdrop with them everywhere they go, which the backdrop is supposed to be the scenery, that's why they're shooting live on location, you can shut down a news crew. And I shut down a news crew, and they eventually packed up shop and left. Either that or they pulled a fast one on me and snuck somewhere else, but this was before all of the Jews started pouring, all of the Shabbos Goyim and Jews started pouring out of the AIPAC conference last year around this time. And this is how I entertained myself while I was waiting for them all to start streaming out at the end of the conference for the day. I think that was on Wednesday. So yes, get behind news crews anytime you think there's an area where they're going to report live on the scene. Like, if something like Kate Steinle happens, there are going to be news crews showing up near Pier 23 in San Francisco. So wait for them to show up and have a folded up sign that you then, especially if they're live, which is a rare thing, but get behind them with that sign. Something USS Liberty, Levant Affair, Project for a New American Century,
Not just a big Happy Merchant picture. How would that be?
Well, that would shut it down too. And I think, we outnumber the media vastly, and there were enough of us where we could have rapid response teams where the moment the media start filming on location, hopefully someone's within a few blocks, and we send them, we could all have signs or folded up posters in our trunks that are just like, just like having a spare tire in your trunk. Is the media trying to report or record a report somewhere with a significant area as the backdrop? And there you go. That's the best way I can think of to disrupt the media. Now, they're shutting down the comment sections on places like CNN and Huffington Post and heavily moderating them if they haven't shut them down So if you're going to shitpost, do it IRL behind the news crew. It works. I've done it, and I probably cost whatever Jew-controlled network that reporter team was from in front of AIPAC. Probably cost them the equivalent of $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 between their time on the satellite that they had reserved, which is very expensive per minute, by the way, and they charge per the minute and per the hour. It's very expensive. Also, they were paying, a camera guy and a sound guy and the reporter, and so they were paying them. I wasted their time. I wasted their airtime on the satellite, and who knows, for about 2 or 3 hours of my time, I might have cost that Jewish mainstream media studio a few $1,000s. Money, time well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the Goyim No is good. I like the Goyim No. But the thing is, it's a bit esoteric, and a lot of people out there in TV land wouldn't know what it is. CNN, Jewish propaganda, something like that. If you can fit the word Jew in such a way, I don't know. I mean, it's tough off the top of the head, but yeah, Jewish News Network. I don't know. We do want to name the Jew. That's the thing. And again, just like with the Muslims, as far as I'm concerned, it's not hostility. I have no hostility towards Jewish individuals. Even Jewish individuals who I think are kind of, partly responsible. But it's this group behavior, and if we're risking offending some perfectly nice Jews, but otherwise, I mean, if we don't offend a few perfectly nice Jews, how are we going to save our society?
Exactly, and these were all questions that elites have had to tackle in the past, and most of the time it wound up in expulsion, which is why I just come out and say that, which is my starting point. If people want to have a conversation, I might change that platform promise, but at the very least, I want people to ask, well, why would you say this? Why would you advocate for that? And so I think we have to take a hard line. They're literally calling for our genocide, at least the elite ones, and certainly all the ones cooperating in the media, the blue checka marks, as I call them, the checka marks, not check marks on Twitter. I think that we can come out and have a very hard side of the bargain that we're trying to drive. And so I'm moving on to the next question here. David G. asks, how do Jews wield Islam against whites if Muslims are aware of Jewish supremacy? And I covered this in a video earlier today. So the Palestinians are aware that they're being displaced by Jews. The Palestinians are aware that the Jews are committing genocide against them. The Palestinians are also, however, aware, and all of the Arab countries are aware, that the American public is paying the taxes that gets this done. The way to stop the Jews from wielding Islam or black-pilled Muslims against whites is to let those Muslims know, let the Muslim countries, especially if they're still in their country, let them know that Jews run our media and we're trying to do something about that. And that so long as they have a stranglehold on the media, it's almost impossible to combat their lies. What do you think of that?
Well, so I think Muslims in general tend to think that Jews have inordinate amount of power that and it's wielded in a way that is detrimental to most of the rest of the world. I think Muslims know this, even if they don't really understand how it's done. I think there's a lot of hostility towards Jews among Muslims. Be that as it may, if Muslims have a chance to enter Europe or Australia or North America and take advantage of the riches of our society, the wealth of our society, and also become help spread the faith, because that's what they're supposed to do. They're going to do it, and if it's Jews that enable them to do that, then Jews are, and if they're not going to refrain from entering North America, Australia, and Europe.
Well, why would they? Their countries have been bombed to the ground by our mercenaries.
But even the ones that haven't,
people respond to economic incentive. If the Jews advertise, "Hey, come to Europe, come to the United States, we'll tax the white people and then give all of the money to your replacements," That's a pretty hard deal to pass up.
So they're not going to refrain from coming to our countries just because it's the Jews who are enabling them, and they're also not going to give up their hostility towards Jews just because it was the Jews that enabled them.
But I think that the Jewish instinct is more to hurt white people than to mitigate problems caused by massive Muslim immigration. And as much as I enjoy seeing the Jews pack up and leave France, and at the same time, so the Jews took a problem of theirs, which is angry neighbors that are pissed off that Jews are just committing genocide in the Middle East and sponsoring ISIS and committing massive atrocities in the Middle East. They turned to those Jews that were they turned to those Arabs that were a danger to the continued tyranny of Israel in the Middle East, that would check the growth of Israel. They took what was a liability to Israel and turned it into an asset to international Jewry by making those people who then get migrant status and all sorts of white people's taxes. They make them into a destabilizing force in our countries. So the Jews are turning lemons into lemonade, which is of course poisonous to white countries in the form of an incited replacement population. And it's not all Muslims, by the way. They do it. Anyone they can pay to come into white countries and agitate against us, they do. It's not just Muslims. You have to remember that even if Muslims are being paid or incentivized to serve a purpose and propagandized to serve that purpose, which is to be the proletariat against whites and our former elites in these countries, you have to remember people respond to economic incentive, number one, and number two, propaganda works. So they're giving them the incentive to go to white countries, and then they're propagandizing them to hate whites. And,
Yeah, it's that combination. That's that combination. So there's two things. There's the immigration, and it's from Muslim countries. It's from in the United States. It's mostly from south of the border, from Hispanic countries, but it's from Asia. It's from all over. And so there's that issue. But then it's compounded by new immigrants are then incentivized to agitate against the interests of the traditional population.
Absolutely.
And that combination makes it particularly toxic.
And did you want to talk about maybe some examples other than Muslims of how the Jewish elite is achieving this, using, perhaps expand on the analogous thing happening with where people from south of our border are being incentivized and then propagandized against us? I have to step away for a minute, but I can hear you. You want to cover that for a second?
Yeah. So, in certain ways, the Hispanics from below the border, they're Christians, just like the majority population of the United States, and they're Spanish speakers, and Spanish and English are pretty closely related languages. They could come in and assimilate a lot easier than Muslims could. Not that that's what we want. I mean, they've got plenty of space and countries down there. There doesn't need to be massive immigration. But they could, but the incentive structures are not to. The incentive structures are to come in and, regardless of their skin color, to think of themselves as non-white. Yep. If you look at the data from the 1960 census, there were, what were there? I think there might have been a couple of million Mexicans. I was just looking at it a couple days ago. They didn't have a Hispanic category, but they did have a Mexican category. And the Mexicans were, maybe it was people who were born in Mexico, were 90%, I think about 90% of them thought of themselves as white. They listed themselves as being white. Of course, the people who are coming more recently are less white and more, Indian American or Indian, mestizo and whatnot.
Mayan from the Zapatas. Yeah.
But the thing is, even the whites are incentivized to relate to being Hispanic, and so you have people like Jim Acosta at CNN, or people who run these advocacy organizations, these Hispanic advocacy organizations, and they, they're incentivized because by thinking of themselves as and identifying as Hispanic, they get preferential access to education, to scholarships. They get preferential access access to jobs, and of course, part of the deal is when you identify as Hispanic, then you've got to hold the door open for other Hispanics, other minorities, and help squeeze whites out. And when I say part of the deal, it might not be explicit, but that's the way it works. Are you back?
I think the key point here in what you're saying is that it doesn't matter who they can get to come here and identify as separate from us, which they're automatically going to do. People go into ghettos when they move to a country. That's what they do. They always have. The key purpose is that they can be used to destabilize this country and, I believe, create a revolutionary environment.
And what kind of revolution?
So, if you look at the cookie-cutter pattern, it's that they have to have the elite squared off against the majority of the people. And that's what they did with the proletariat in Russia. That's what they did with the commoners in Britain. That's what they did with the peasants in France. And in white countries, because we tend to be so social, and with the exception of feudalism, which the Jews played a huge role in the abuses of the peasants under European feudalism in Europe, they have not been able to successfully overthrow the elites here completely. You still have Dr. Kevin McDonald's popping up. You still have people like me that wake up and challenge them. People like Dr. Duke that have been fighting them for 50 years. Gentlemen like you that come from the other side of the aisle that wake up. And what they need is a revolutionary force that can be used as a weapon against anyone that speaks out against their power. Ultimately, their goal is...
I might even call it a revolutionary force. It's more of a mopping up force. I mean, right now, they are in control of our society. We are living under a Jewish tyranny already. So, I think it's more mopping up operations.
Well,
We do have these Antifa who are committing acts of violence against our people.
Well, I think it's just one of the arrows in their
I think
quiver.
A little revolution. That's the revolution. That's what you're doing. You're the revolutionary.
Well, I'm one of many. There are others, and I'm asking more people to join in and make this a big revolution. And, if anyone's my better, please step up. If you want to take my place in running, if you're willing to talk about these key issues, I'll endorse you and drop out myself. But Bruno Doberman asks, do you think they will mass kill the Palestinian people soon? I think they already have been doing that. I mean, we can talk about 1948 was a massacre of the Palestinians. How many thousands of Palestinians were killed? How many of them were forced from their homes, forced into camps? I mean, you care to comment on that? I think we're already witnessing the mass killing of Palestinians.
It's a good question because on the one hand, if you look at all the deaths, it's an ongoing massacre. It's an ongoing massacre. On the other hand, the Palestinian birth rate has remained very, very high. And so the Palestinian population's not falling, even though they're being genocided. It's this kind of odd thing where they're being genocided, but not fast enough to actually fully exterminate the population. They keep having babies, which is not the case with Europeans.
Which is why, of course, they're stopping with the brunt force of a sword, the brute force of the sword, and they're moving now towards incentivizing them to move to white countries, where they can then see us as the enemy instead of Israel. And at the same time, I'm going to be at AIPAC in a few days protesting, and all of the pro-Palestinian rallies I've seen have been co-opted by Jews the last 2 years. Every time I go to one of these pro-Palestinian things, it's all, Israel is an evil European colonial state. And so...
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So, which AIPAC conference is this that you're going to?
The one in D.C. at the big conference center.
Is this an annual conference? Is this the big annual one?
The big annual one, yeah. I was there last year. It's where...
Yeah. And then which Palestinian groups or pro-Palestinian groups are you referring to?
I can't remember which names, but at UC Berkeley, I've been to 2 or 3 of these where, they said the problem with Israel is it's a white supremacist state, and the problem with Israel is they don't have enough trannies, and the problem with Israel is that it's a white supremacist colonial state, and it's anything but Zionism. They talk about. They try and blame white people for Israel. It's insane. And when I was at Nakba Day in front of the San Francisco consulate of Israel, same exact talking points. And there were Jews saying, I am a Jew that is against white supremacy and therefore I oppose Israel. And it's just complete.
Yeah, well, it's Chomsky.
Yeah.
This comes from Noam Chomsky.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, your observation about the Palestinian groups is right. I saw it, and I haven't been involved with that stuff for a dozen years probably, but it was, when I was teaching universities, these student solidarity committees for Palestine, they were completely co-opted or largely co-opted in the process. Did you see she looked Muslim, the Muslim girl who was confronting Chelsea Clinton when Chelsea Clinton a couple days ago was going to, was it New York University, going to some some memorial service for the dead people in New Zealand. Did you see that confrontation?
No, I did not, but if you...
Exactly the type of thing you're talking about. So you had this Muslim girl, and she's confronting Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton had, a few weeks ago, tweeted out nasty things about Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar said that AIPAC was a real thing, and then Chelsea Clinton tweeted out something like Ilhan Omar is anti-Semite. And so somehow...
Chelsea married a Jew, by the way.
Yes, she's married to a Jew, and she's got a Jewish baby, and she's got another one on the way. She's very pregnant.
Oh, she actually converted.
Well, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if she did. We know. Princess Ivanka, Princess Shiksa converted. I think I don't know. I don't know if she converted. My guess is she probably did. So take that with a grain of salt. But at any rate, Chelsea Clinton was. The thing is, Chelsea Clinton is a lot of things, and she isn't responsible for what happened in New Zealand. That was very odd. But the very same day as what happened in New Zealand is Bibi Netanyahu shooting over 100 missiles, really advanced missiles into Gaza, killing who knows how many people. Nobody bothers to count.
It was
you have this massacre in Gaza, and the Clintons and the establishment, but the Clintons are a big hunk of the establishment, are very responsible for that. They're very responsible for that. A lot of those weapons went over, whether it was in Bill Clinton's administration or under Hillary's Secretary of State stewardship. They're very responsible for that. But this Muslim girl at the university, she's not standing up for her own people who got killed directly by these, American provided weapons, but somehow is going on some weird roundabout trail that involves white nationalism and accusing Chelsea Clinton of that.
Yeah, it's insane. I actually, when I was running for Senate, I sat down and met with some of the heads of the Muslim community in the Bay Area here. And the older ones were super concerned about the genocide in Palestine. They were very concerned about Syria being destabilized. They were very concerned about what was happening in the in their home countries. And I said, this is terrible what's happening, and I think it should be stopped. These are crimes against humanity. And they agreed. And the problem is a lot of the younger ones that are going to school and stuff are being told that it's all white people's fault. This is European colonialism. And, I had to confront several people that were saying, well, why do you white people let them rule over you and all that? And I had to, make it clear, and this is critical. This addresses the first or second question we got on this stream, is that they don't know that we don't know. They don't know that white people, for the most part...
saying the Muslims don't know. You see, the Muslims know at least a lot about power, Jewish power in their own.
They assume that we know that they assume that we know that we're serving the Jews. Most of them think
we don't because they look too much like us. We can't tell them apart. And of course, the more and more non-white people that come into the United States, the more and more Jews are going to look white.
Yeah.
It's, something. This was something I really didn't think of fully until I think maybe just today. That it really didn't occur to me. But here's something else. The whole circumcision business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought too much about it, but Dr. Duke Red Bulled me on this. The reason for the big increase in circumcision, which happened in the wake of World War II,
Crypsis.
it was so that they could blend in.
Yep, crypsis.
They could, how do you call it? What was that?
Dr. Kevin McDonald calls it crypsis, or
Crypsis. Okay, crypsis.
like cryptology.
So, crypto Jew, cryptology, right? Crypto.
Yeah,
So that fade in.
crypsis, according to Dr. Kevin McDonald, is one of the chief strategies of Jews in taking power and hiding the fact that they're actually power.
Basically, they've chopped off hundreds, by now, probably a couple 100 million Goyim foreskins, or I guess half the population, maybe 100 million Goyim foreskins, or probably a lot more.
They got mine.
Yeah. I have to maintain my dignity and not talk about these things, but still.
Well, I'm angry about it. I want my foreskin back.
I'm pretty angry too when you get down to it.
I want my goddamn foreskin back. They chopped off a bunch of my dick. I want it back. I was a day old, or I was an hour old. I had no say in the matter. The doctors told my parents he's going to get a dick infection if we don't chop this thing off. I mean, that's literally the line.
I was looking at the comment section of one of my recent videos, and somebody had said something about, because I was talking about Trump, and he was saying, Yang 2020, $1,000 a month, and he'll ban circumcision. And I wrote back, I said, well, if he can give us back our foreskins, then you got a deal.
Yeah, give me back my foreskin. So Spellcheck asks, Little Revolution, why don't you go to your local mosques and talk about the JQ? I think Muslims could be a strong ally to remove bagel. And this is what I did. I went, I approached Muslim community leaders. Some of them reached out to me after the big video that got millions of views where I was being kicked out of the CAGOP for saying that I wouldn't serve Israel. They reached out to me, and I talked to them, and they know what page I'm on. And the problem is that I arrived at the statement of the problem with them in terms of outreach to the Muslim community is that there are two parts to this. Number one, most of the Muslims assume that whites know that Jews call the shots in this country. Number two, the younger Muslims, especially the ones that grew up here, are being indoctrinated to blame white people in general for what the Jews are doing. And this is the same as slavery, where the slave trade going back to Roman times has been Jewish. This is the same as and white people getting blamed for the slave trade in general. And Jews aren't white, by the way. This is the same as the child sex trafficking rings being, quote unquote, the Russian mafia, which is all Jews at the top levels.
Yeah. I'm going to say one thing that I've never said before.
Yeah.
But there's a whole thing, Jews aren't white, are Jews white, or Jews not white. This is what I would say. Jews are not non-Jewish whites.
That's very well put, and that's also that's concise, and it's also pretty darn, that's well put. That's all I have to say.
I'm really enjoying this. But I think we've been going on for about an hour, and I think I have other things I'm going to need to do soon. But I'd certainly be happy to do it again. Do we have any more questions before I have to log off?
Okay, let's make this one the last one. And we recorded your show prior to this, too, so we have been chatting for quite some time, but it's always a pleasure. Thanks for stopping by, and I'm glad I stopped by your channel as well. By the way, on the way out, on the outro, I want you to plug where they can find you again. But the last question is, what can ordinary people do? This is from John Doe. What can ordinary people do to aid the removal of Jews from power in the USA? And I guess I'll answer it, and then you can give your answer and do your outro if you got the time.
Okay.
Okay, so my answer is expose the fact that Jews control the media if you are talking to someone that's concerned about fake news. So if you're dealing with a Breitbart fan, and they hate the fake news, well, you explain to them and prove to them that it's Jewish. So think about yourself as a doctor, and you have to figure out which symptoms your patient is displaying. So if the goy or the non-Jew is showing symptoms that he's fed up with the fake media, then feed him red pills that are appropriate. The cure for that, which is showing Jews control the media, that's why it's all lies. If you're dealing with someone that's upset about foreign policy, a peace activist that's upset about the occupation of Palestine by Israel, that's upset that we got dragged into the Iraq War, that got upset that we're now trying to go to war with Iran and Syria, point out the fact that this has all been planned Project for New American Century, point them towards Ryan Dawson, who will talk about Jewish control of the State Department. If you're talking to a Christian that's upset that they have to bake the gays a cake, tell them, well, all of this pro-gay stuff was pushed in 1920s Germany by Jews. All this tranny stuff was pushed in 1920s by the Jews, and the Germans got sick of it, and that's one of the reasons why they cut down on Jewish influence on culture. Talk about how Hollywood's controlled by Jews and how they've slowly been introducing pornography and normalization of homosexuality and pedophilia. So that's for Christians. You can also point them towards Martin Luther, the Jews and Their Lies, or any of the popes, if they're Catholic, that have complained about Jewish subversion. So the answer to the question, John Doe, what people can do to aid in the removal of Jews from power in the USA, depends completely on what person you're dealing with. There is no universal cure-all. You have to figure out what they care about, where their passions lie, and then figure out how Jews are subverting that, and then tell them. And Jews are subverting just about all good aspects of a healthy society, so regardless of what their passion is, you'll find a way Jews are screwing it up, and then point that out to them. And what do you think, Dr. Slattery, before we go?
Yeah, no, that's all good. A month ago or so, on my channel, I had the Goyim's Choice Awards, and you might want to go back or Google the Goyim's Choice Awards. It was fun. We a friend of mine and I, we had a bit of fun, and we did a very Hollywood kind of awards show. And one of the categories was, how do we solve the Jewish problem? And the contestants were, or the nominees were, exterminate the Jews, expel the Jews, and expose the Jews. And the winner was expose the Jews. Name the Jews. And this is what you're doing. This is why what you do is so important. Goyim knowing who's a Jew. Judar is kryptonite. That's absolutely kryptonite. And I think if people simply know who's Jewish...
Can I interrupt for just 1 second, yeah. Dr. Slattery? Yeah. Okay, I want you to know one thing. So, kryptonite, right? Who wrote Superman? Who writes all these superhero movies?
Pretty sure it was a Jew.
Okay.
I know Captain America was Jewish.
So Superman is a racial alien from another world. He's just a visitor. He's a guest, and he has to hide his true identity. All right. And what is his only weakness? Kryptonite. So what does crypto start with? Crypto.
Oh my God. I never realized that. That is amazing.
It's probably coincidental, but I think it's funny as hell. I just realized that now when you're talking about that. Right now I'm linking your article on the Goyim's Choice Awards from Dr. Duke's site in the chat. And if you want to pick up where you left off, if you can remember what you were talking about before I interrupted with the joke.
So if people know, so for instance, when I'm watching Tucker and I see that guy and he names George Soros and Rob Reiner and the whatever that Steyer guy is, Steyer or whatever his name was.
Steyer.
But I he's Jewish because I've looked him up. I see it and it's like, yeah, there you go. They're all Jews. It's Jewish money, but most people don't. They don't, and so they can't connect the dots.
So their main source of power is their being crypto. Their crypsis, as Dr. Kevin McDonald calls it, as their evolutionary strategy, and kryptonite is the way to break their crypsis. The Jews' kryptonite is being named.
This is why they can't take over in China, in Japan, and Korea the way they've taken over in every white country, because it's the bat. They can they can come in and they can disappear in a puff of white smoke in our countries. They can pretend to be white. They can't do that in other countries, and this is why they haven't taken over the Oriental countries the way they've taken over our countries. So what do? This is what I say to do. And I don't know if the young people are even watching TV anymore. Maybe this is a boomer thing, but whenever I'm watching the news or reading anything, I have my phone, and whenever I see a name, I want to know what that person's ethnic background is. And I do this all day long, and I look up people. And, it used to be hard. It used to be hard because you didn't used to have a phone to look them up on, and you didn't used to be the databases and everything. Now Wikipedia has gotten actually very, very, it's not 100%, it's not foolproof, but it's pretty good. And you can, you see some journalist on TV, and he or she's making these points, look them up. And just get into the habit of doing that, and it'll really help you therefore carry out the recommendations that Patrick just made of how to approach, somebody about the gay wedding cakes or whatever else it is that you're doing.
Whatever they love in life, pretty much anything worth loving in life, the Jews are working on destroying. So, whatever they care about, show them how the Jews are working against it. Now, if it's something like whale watching or something or another, that's a hard sell. But other than that, if they love tradition,
but there might be an angle.
Yeah, but
here's an angle. Here is your catch-all angle. If we weren't having to devote so much time to these crazy Jewish projects like the wars and the ethnic replacement and everything, we would be able to concentrate on saving the whales.
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, if you're concerned about the environment, and the main driver for poor environment is overpopulation, well, whites reproduce at pretty low birth rates, and if the Jews keep on flooding our countries with replacement migrants, and it doesn't matter where they're coming from, it doesn't matter what the replacement migrant is, the thing is, there's one thing in common: everywhere there are white people, the Jews are flooding in. Replacement population, and we're depending on where you go, it's a different type of replacement population. In Australia, a different replacement population is being brought in. The whites are forced to pay for them, and then they're propagandized against the whites. It's a different mix in Europe of the replacement population, where those three things are being done to them. It's a different mix here in Americas. The key thing is that everywhere Jews are forcing white countries or white areas to accept replacement population, forcing the whites to pay for it, and using the money from the whites to propagandize those replacements against the whites. The end goal, and I am firmly convinced of this because this is how Jewish revolutions always end, is that the useful idiots and the Jews will commit then mass atrocities against those people in the host society that had been blocking the Jews from absolute tyranny. And we're on the verge of that here, and that's why I'm running. I want to stop the Jews from committing atrocities in the United States, just as I want to stop them from committing atrocities in the Middle East and everywhere else around the world.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your podcast or your live cast, and thank you for being on my podcast.
Well, you're very welcome. It's always a pleasure, Dr. Slattery, and feel free to ring me up anytime. If I'm not busy, I'll answer.
Okay, and people, if you want to, like I say, if you want to check me out, you can check out nationalbugle.com or go to the Patrick Slattery YouTube channel.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on, Dr. Slattery. National Bugle Radio, Dr. Patrick Slattery. He's also a co-host on the Dr. Duke Show, and he is often a co-host or the stand-in host on the Stormfront Radio Show.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a good night, Doctor.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so that was, I brought on a very intelligent man with a lot of experience in politics. He came from the other side of the aisle. He came from more of like the Bernie bro background. Before that, he was more of a kind of what you would call a lefty in a few decades back. And he woke up and realized that the problems with international relations were driven by Jewish power. Ultimately, I woke up for different reasons than he did. Foreign affairs was not as big of a red pill, or not as big of a vector for red pilling me. It was more subversion of white countries and subversion of non-Jewish countries in general so that Jews can advance their agenda. But that's an example from earlier. Before he woke up, Dr. Slattery would have been susceptible to completely different red pills that would have woken him up to the JQ than I was. What worked on me was Jewish cultural subversion, realizing that our countries are intentionally being destroyed. And with Dr. Slattery, his interests were strongly with in terms of how the government works and foreign affairs. And I don't want to misrepresent, but just conceptually, he had different areas of interest than I did, and it was different red pills that woke him up than the ones that woke me up. And there is no one cure-all red pill. You have to know your patient. You have to know the symptoms of what red pill to give them. And for me, someone who grew up just completely dismayed by what was happening to white people in white countries, Dr. Kevin McDonald was my red pill. You need to know your patient so you can know what medicine to dispense. You don't want to prescribe the wrong medication, or you might drive away the person who otherwise can be cured. You need the red pill. Yeah, so Fellow Man Live just asked, why was Pat pro-Israeli not long ago? Well, Fellow Man Live, that is a great question. It's because I didn't know Jews controlled the media. At church, all of the pastors and all of the speakers said how great Israel was. When I was listening to Fox News, I thought I was a conservative, and all I heard on Fox News was how great Israel was. When I listened to, my constitutionalist radio show host, I used to like to listen to Mark Levin, and Mark Levin was constantly talking about how great Israel is. And, he was pro-Constitution, so why wouldn't I take his word on it? I turned into Sean Hannity. I tuned into Sean Hannity, and he was singing the praise of Israel. Rush Limbaugh. Everybody that I listened to trying to get conservative traditional news was always saying how great Israel was. How was I to know what Israel really was? How was I to know that a lot of these people were Jews? How was I to know that those who were saying all these nice things about Israel were in the pay of Jews? So, to answer your question, fellow live man, that's why I was pro-Israeli before I wake up. Pretty much everyone who hates degeneracy, pretty much everyone that is opposed to degeneracy in our culture is going to listen to stations and hosts and referent others that are extremely pro-Israeli. So, if this guy's pro-10th Amendment, pro-4th Amendment, and pro-free speech and all this stuff, and he says Israel's good, they associate the things you like with Israel, and that's how they get what you would call right-wingers shilling for Israel. And I was an unknowing shill for Israel for years, just by listening by the media I consumed. Show me one place someone can go to on the television or the radio if they're culturally conservative and get non-pro-Israeli propaganda. And I'll tell you, that doesn't exist. I'll take a few more questions here. So Mexico Capizion, I don't know how to spell that. Little Revolution, do you plan on doing any campaign rallies in Central California? Yes, but I like to show up to things that are already organized. If you want to set something up and invite me there, please do. I am incredibly broke nowadays. I'm trying to do this campaign without spending much money because I don't have it. And if you guys can invite me to things that are already all set up, I'll come speak. Just work out with me when you want to do it. I'll tell you whether or not I'm available, and go ahead and organize the thing. I'll come speak. Let's see. Well, I'm going to get going here. I'm pretty tired, and I also have work I need to do for tomorrow for what I derive my living from, which I'm currently a student because I'm probably not going to be able to ever work a normal job again. I'm using my GI Bill, and I have classwork that's due for tomorrow, and I need to get back to it. It was a pleasure having Dr. Slattery on. It was a pleasure answering your questions, and I look forward to the day when I'm no longer trying to use my boat as a studio because the internet connection and the sound quality, because of the bandwidth constraints, are going to be very limited here. It was a pleasure, and thank you for tuning in. Have a good night, all of you fellow people who challenge Jewish supremacism. Stay strong, don't get black-pilled, and name the Jew boldly. Good night.